It started for less than a penny, and then it shot up to almost $70,000. It's a story that made some people millionaires, and let's be honest, bankrupted plenty of others. But today, we're gonna cut through all that hype. We're diving into a really powerful argument, one based on some deep analysis that says Bitcoin isn't just taking a little dip, it's actually structurally guaranteed to fail. Yeah, you heard that right. This isn't about some market correction or a crypto winter. The whole point here is that we're looking at an inevitable structural collapse. The very things Bitcoin was supposed to fix have ironically become its biggest Achilles heel. I think after we go through this, you are never going to look at Bitcoin the same way again. So let's just jump right into the first and maybe the most uncomfortable truth: the claim that Bitcoin is a straight-up environmental catastrophe. And look, this isn't some small side issue. It's a massive foundational flaw that puts it on a direct collision course with, well, the entire planet. What you're looking at right there, that's the average amount of energy chewed up by a single Bitcoin transaction, 1,200 kilowatt hours. To put that into perspective for you, that's enough juice to power an average American home for over 40 days, all for just one single transaction. It's wild. And this is where the scale of the problem just becomes insane. Look at this comparison. A simple Visa transaction uses a tiny fraction of that, just 0.002 kilowatt hours. You do the math, that means Bitcoin is 600,000 times more energy intensive. It's not just a little bit worse, it's in a completely different and frankly much more wasteful universe. And here's the real kicker. This isn't a bug. You can't just patch it or fix it in an update. It is a core feature. The whole algorithm is designed to make mining harder and harder over time, which means it is programmed to demand more and more energy. So, as the rest of the world is trying to solve a climate crisis, how can a system that's designed to be this inefficient possibly have a future? Okay, so that leads us right into the next major pillar of this argument, the technology itself. I mean, Bitcoin was absolutely revolutionary back in 2009, but in today's world, the argument is that it's basically become a relic. Think of it like a clunky old flip phone in the age of the smartphone. And this visual just lays the problem bare. The entire Bitcoin network, the whole thing, can process at its absolute maximum about 7 transactions per second. 7 for the whole world. At the same time, the Visa network is just cruising along, handling around 65,000 transactions every single second. I mean, they're not even playing the same sport. This quote from the source really just says it all, doesn't it? That whole dream of banking the unbanked kind of falls apart when the technology can't even handle the traffic of a small city, let alone the global financial system. And we all know how that story ended for the flip phone giants like Nokia. And you know what? The rest of the crypto world hasn't been sitting still. Ethereum just fundamentally re-engineered itself to slash its energy use. And you've got newer blockchains like Solana and Cardano that were literally built from scratch to be way faster and way more efficient. Bitcoin is getting left in the dust by its own industry. Okay, but what about Bitcoin's one core promise, the one thing that it was all about? Decentralization. You know, this idea of a system free from the greedy hands of banks or governments. Well, the source material we're looking at claims that this is actually its biggest lie. Just take a look at this chart. Over 65% of all the computing power that keeps the Bitcoin network secure is controlled by just five mining pools. Now, these are just groups of miners who pool their power. But this concentration means the network is theoretically vulnerable to what's called a 51% attack. That's where this tiny group could actually get together, halt the network, or even reverse transactions. The whole integrity of the system would be shattered. And if you think the power is centralized, wait till you see where the money is. It's even worse. A staggering 95% of all Bitcoin is held in just 2% of the wallets. This isn't the great democratization of finance we were promised. It's a classic oligopoly, where a tiny club of ultra-rich early birds and institutions control everything. So let's recap. We've got an environmental disaster, obsolete tech, and a system that's secretly centralized. But what about the threats from the outside? Well, let's look at how governments are slowly, methodically, and very effectively dismantling Bitcoin's entire reason for being. See, governments realized they don't actually need to ban Bitcoin. That's messy. All they have to do is control the on-ramps and the off-ramps. You know, the places where you turn your real money into crypto and back again. So they regulate the exchanges, they make you prove who you are, they tax your gains, and they're moving to get rid of anonymous wallets. And just like that, its appeal as an anonymous, unregulated asset, poof, it's gone. And here's the checkmate. It's called central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. China, Europe, the US, they are all deep into developing their own official digital money. Now think about it. When you have a government-backed, totally secure, super fast, and basically free digital dollar or euro, what's the point of a volatile, slow, and risky asset like Bitcoin for the average? And all of this brings us to the price itself, that huge trillion-dollar valuation. The argument here is that this entire thing is just a massive speculative bubble, and it's built on a foundation of sand. And deep inside that shaky foundation, there's a ticking time bomb. So let's ask the critical question. What is the single biggest systemic risk that could bring this entire house of cards crashing down, maybe even overnight? It's not a government ban or another market crash. No, it's something much, much deeper inside the system itself. It's a thing called Tether. It's what's known as a stable coin, a crypto that's supposed to hold a steady value. In this case, one Tether is supposed to be backed by one real US dollar sitting in a bank somewhere. Here's the problem though, and it is a huge problem. It has never, ever undergone a full independent audit to actually prove it has the money it claims to have. And this one single unaudited asset is used for up to 70% of all Bitcoin trading. It's basically the grease that keeps the entire market moving. And this is where the source makes its most chilling comparison. Tether is to Bitcoin what Lehman Brothers was to the 2008 financial crisis. If, or maybe when, Tether's questionable finances are finally exposed and it collapses, the liquidity, the actual money for the entire Bitcoin market could just vanish in an instant. That would trigger a catastrophic price crash from which there is likely no recovery. So we've gone through the environment, the tech, the centralization, the regulators, and this massive speculative bubble. But believe it or not, there is one final existential threat looming on the horizon. One that attacks the very mathematical foundation that Bitcoin is built on. Quantum computing. It sounds like something out of science fiction, I know, but here's the deal. Bitcoin's security is built on codes that are impossible for today's computers to break. But quantum computers, they play by a totally different set of rules. Experts are predicting that within a decade or two, they'll be powerful enough to just crack Bitcoin's encryption wide open, letting them steal coins from literally any wallet. The second that becomes a real possibility, all trust in the network evaporates, and the value goes straight to zero. So let's just lay it all out. According to this analysis, Bitcoin is environmentally destructive, technologically backward, controlled by a tiny few, being systematically choked off by regulators, propped up by a very shady asset, and completely defenseless against future technology. Any one of these would be a serious problem, but all of them together, they form an absolutely overwhelming case for an inevitable collapse. Which really brings us to the final critical question that the source material leaves us with, and it's a question for anyone who's invested or even just thinking about it. When the music finally stops and there are no chairs left, do you really want to be the last one holding the bag?